the rich human interest story of Hollywood is filled with happiness and despair, joy and tragedy, a crazy quilt of madness, sanity, laughter and tears, the desperate struggle to reach the top and the battle to remain there.
My name is Vivian Kerr, and this is Conversations with Actors.
All right. Well, fire away, Gridley.
So I sort of like to start with asking everyone just how they got into acting in the first place.
The first play that I did was in high school. It was my last year in high school. I did a play called Harvey. Played Elwood P. Dowd. That's the man who sees he talks to the imaginary 6-foot rabbit. But before that, I did stand-up comedy. I played the banjo and told jokes at places all over Buffalo as Banjo Bill Sadler.
In high school?
And, yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah. And it was good fun, but I don't know. I had an English teacher who said, "Why don't you try out for the senior play?" And as soon as I did, I knew it was a much more it was going to be much more rewarding than standing up and telling corny jokes and playing the banjo at fire halls and nursing homes and things like that. So I started. I did community. I did the high school play, then I did a community theater play, and then I went off to Geneseo and studied acting for 4 years, and got a scholarship to go to Cornell and do nothing but acting. Got an MFA and did that for 2 years, and then moved to New York, where I did nothing but theater for the first 11 years of my career.
When you were studying acting, was there any specific teacher that you feel like you learned the most from?
I don't know. I had a variety of teachers. I think it's funny, when I was at Cornell, I was unhappy a lot. I kind of felt like I was getting pushed and pulled in directions that I didn't feel comfortable with. And as soon as I got out into the professional world, it was like, I remembered why I loved it in the first place. It was.
By pushed and pulled, do you mean like sort of doing those classes that make you uncomfortable, like those mask work or improv or things that you don't necessarily actually do once you're out auditioning? Yeah,
exactly. And some of it was stuff that, you learn. I learned a lot, but it was, some of what I learned was what acting isn't, like, make yourself feel something, in scene work, and at the end of the day, in my opinion, it doesn't matter whether it wasn't how I get to where I need when my work is good. I don't know. I was sort of stumbling and being. Like I said, pushed and pulled in directions that were really uncomfortable. So I was happy to get out of there.
Do you feel like you learned more later while you were working than you did when you were in school?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Once you're in the trenches, once there's an audience out there, or you're in the rehearsal process with your fellow actors, and it's problem solving and exploring, and in that professional atmosphere, I just blossomed. I was just having fun again.
How did you how did you get representation when you left Cornell?
I did. Let's see. I did a season at Trinity Square and a season at the Florida Studio Theater, and I came and did a show I played Ivanov in New York City, and all of this without any representation. And finally, I was cast by Joe Papp in the Shakespeare in the Park, and I was in the non-equity ensemble, right, Henry V, and I invited agents to come. Well, let me rephrase this. I went around to the actors who were in the show and asked them if their agents had come and who their agents were, and would they mind if I called them. And then I proceeded to call these various agencies and say, I played the gay monk, in the show you saw Wednesday. And they all said, well, when you're in something good, let me, that you really have something to do. And I did this play called The Ballygombeen Bequest. It was Brendan Behan, Irish comedy, but a satire. I mean, it was a really biting piece of political comedy. And I did it in the basement of a church, the St. Clement's Church in New York, in Hell's Kitchen. And I invited Marilyn Zatmary of the Gage Group. Mm. And she came backstage and said, I want to represent you. And that was that.
When you were doing all this theater in New York, would you have been happy just sort of continuing to make your living purely doing theater, or did you have a desire to do camera work?
I'd always had a desire to do camera work, but what was available to me were tons and tons of plays, off Broadway, and there wasn't any money in it. That was that was really the problem. Living in the East Village and doing play after play and just barely, scraping by. I was making a lot of friends and I was learning a lot. But it wasn't until I did Biloxi Blues on Broadway, the Neil Simon play, that I sort of jumped to the movies.
Mm. How did you get that production?
Sorry?
How did you get into that production?
The Broadway show?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's sort of every actor's dream who's like off Broadway, right?
I had done mountains of off and off Broadway and regional theater, and I was sort of known in the theater world, I guess. I'd won an Obie Award for a play called Limbo Tales, and these auditions came up for the new Neil Simon play, and I auditioned. They had back, and then they had me back again, and it was, I think there were four callbacks or 5 callbacks.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was really awful. It was the last one. The very last callback, I was down in the basement of the theater. I was so nervous, I was throwing up in the theater.
Oh no. You're just like, please, just give it to me already, please.
Either give it to me or shoot me. Just make this stop. But it worked out. But it was that's how it is with callbacks, though, because with each one they get like oh my God, now I'm much closer to this job, and
Are you? How good are you at, I don't even know if you still audition. I hope not. But if you do, how good are you at kind of letting it go when you don't get it? When you get, when you work on something for so long and you get really close to it and then it kind of gets away from you, or, they go in a different direction. are you good at now at just sort of like letting it roll off your back, or do you still kind of dwell on it?
I try not to get so tweaked as I used to. I think I'm better at, I think I have a better understanding of the world of the audition process, and if I do still audition.
Do you really? That blows my mind.
Some jobs, I mean, some of them are just straight offers, but there are occasionally, and this was something it took me a long time to learn, was that it has more to do with the directors needing to, it isn't that they don't know who you are, it's that they have, the producers and the director and so on, they have a lot invested in this project of theirs. This is their baby, and they have millions of dollars or whatever, years of work, and it helps their comfort level if they can hear you say their words, if they can get a glimpse of, also it's also useful for the actor to see how they get along with this director. I find myself auditioning them as well. If it's funny because I used to get, if I didn't get the job, I used to get pretty angry, and and then I wouldn't see I wouldn't see the movie, and I would just
like as if that's going to show them, right? That's so funny.
This or that, or I would get tweaked about it, and it's not that isn't useful. I know.
Well, what have you learned about auditioning, I guess, over the years? Like, the way you approach preparing for an audition or even preparing for a role, has that changed over time?
It has. I think the biggest thing is that it's a collaboration. When you walk into an audition, they really want you to do well. They want to connect with you. They don't want to keep looking for, week after week for who's going to be in my movie or who's going to be in my show. They're hoping against hope that you'll be wonderful. So it isn't adversarial like it used to be, or the way I imagined it was. These bastards, they don't room. I guess I approach it much more like a professionals meeting each other. Because I want to hear I want to hear what the director wants to do with this project too. What do you think about this character? Where do you see him going? So I am auditioning them as much as they're deciding about me.
Is there something now that you look for in roles? Like, are you looking for a big arc, or just a kind of a character, or kind of a perspective or point of view that you've never explored before?
I don't know that there's a specific thing that I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to characters that have some depth, that have two or three things going on at the same time. It just makes the playing of it so much more interesting. I'm playing a character right now on a show called Power for the Stars Network, and he's a gangster. He's a mafia sort of. It's like a Joe Valachi kind of a hitman. He's been involved in murders and so on, and he goes down. He's been in prison for a long time. But when he's introduced into the mix, he's not just another badass. he also has a wife who he loves, who is not well, who has cancer, and he can't be there. And there are, he reconnects with a son that he knew his son was, he knew that he had family out there, but they had never connected. So there are all of these really fun sort of personal threads, these human colors that you can layer on top of, or he's not just a hard ass, he isn't just a killer.
If you're playing something, it's so interesting. If you're playing something, like that, and I'm always interested because obviously actors have, everybody kind of has it's really personal, people's approach to what they do. Do you feel like, let's say, obviously you're not a gangster, but let's say you're playing somebody like that, right? Do you think of it more like you're kind of stepping into that world, or do you feel like you're more like bringing that person closer to you?
Yeah, I absolutely. I've played lots of villainous people and murderers and terrorists and what have you. I think I sort of feel like my job is to invest these people with a lot of me. How would I approach it? How would I, the job is to get people to buy it, to believe it, because my philosophy has always been, if I can get you to believe, even for a few minutes, this character, we can take you anywhere. We can go to outer space. We can tell you a science fiction story. We can, and my job as an actor is always to bring as much believable human stuff to the performance, so that you can suspend your disbelief. You can just sit back and enjoy the story and not be constantly thinking, wow, not thinking about the actor, not thinking about, you can get lost in the story if I can get you to believe it, the character, I guess is what I'm saying.
Do you feel like, is there sort of a type of, a type of acting, or a type of, it's like everyone sort of has, I guess, depending on their training, people tend to align themselves with a certain methodology, whether it's Meisner or Stanislavski or whatever. Is there something like that you use as like a reference point in the way that you work, or is it more just based in kind of whatever is practical?
I think I know what you're asking. There are sort of the outside-in school of acting.
Yeah, like there's people who I feel like they change their approach.
I put on a funny nose and an accent.
Right. I mean, I feel like sort of, and then there's.
They will take for my body and spirit and so on. And then there's sort of the Al Pacino, Marlon Brando. I think I'm sort of in the whatever gets you there. I like doing accents. I like finding the character's voice, and I'll often use that as a way to get into the person's body. You have to start somewhere. Sometimes what it'll be is the situation is so close to my, so accessible to me that it's easy to let my own emotions bubble through as I say these words. Leave yourself open. The trick is to leave yourself open, I think, unguarded, so that you let your feelings go where the scene goes. You don't stop them. Don't put a check on them. And often that's the most believable and the most effective. You're not trying to cook something up.
Right.
I've been very good at cooking up, cooking up emotions. But I find, but if I can find a way in to the dialogue, what happens in the scene will affect me. I can get quite affected. I mean, when I did the Green Mile, I played the father of the two little girls who were murdered by Michael Clark Duncan, and I spent practically the whole time I was on the set imagining myself in a situation. I had a little girl at the time. She's 30 now, but about the same age. And to even imagine something happening to her was such an awful place to go.
Yeah. Does that make you nervous ever if the way things have lined up? Well, I do find there's sort of that weird kismet sometimes where something's going on in your actual life and then that shows up in a story that you're working on. Does that ever make you nervous to take that on, or do you notice that kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just insane, but do you ever notice that kind of, it almost feels like fate or something?
I guess, you mean where art imitates life and
yeah, I guess
life imitates art? Yeah, I do see that from time to time. And in that example I just gave you about the Green Mile, it just made it. I was sort of terrified to go there. I didn't even really. I didn't want to imagine that, but that was the task at hand. That's what the script called for. His children are gone, and there's blood on the porch, and he's in a panic. Looking for his lost girls. He finds them dead in the arms of this guy, and it's an awful place to be. And the other thing is, on film anyway, because some of this is the way that Frank Darabont shoots, but on film you can't. You sort of have to go there. You have to let yourself. You have to let yourself go there. You can't pretend for the camera because it sees everything, and the camera just is this unblinking eye that doesn't lie at all. It's really hard to fool it. So I spent like most of that shoot. But even between takes, I would have to sort of stay a little in the mood. I couldn't joke around with the crew and then snap back into this place. I sort of had to keep that bubbling underneath the whole day, so that it was available when they said action.
You were saying because of the way that Frank Darabont shoots, do you feel like certain directors you can kind of, I guess, don't require a certain kind of authenticity in the performance, or, I guess, what exactly did you mean by the way he shot it influenced the way that you had to work on that role?
I guess, well, directors come in all shapes and sizes. They want different things. When Frank never feels quite like he's done with a scene, this is my impression anyway of working with Frank, not who I love, and I've done 3 movies now with him. There's an attention to detail and a love of this. He sort of creates this safe place for the actors to play, and he keeps rolling and shooting until he feels we've gotten somewhere. Something has happened to some. It isn't necessarily what he had in mind when he wrote it, or what he came to the shoot day with, but he doesn't let go of a scene until something extraordinary has occurred, which is terrific. There's another director named Bill Condon I did Kinsey with, who he does a similar thing. He creates this safe place. And you just keep going. You keep going further and further into the character, into the moment, into the scene, until he says, "That's it, I got it." And he sort of I'm not describing this very well, but it's not an accident that every time he does a movie, 1 or 2 or 3 people are nominated for Academy Awards.
Right.
There's Eddie Murphy.
What do you
Dream?
What do you
Jennifer.
do when if you're working with a director who isn't like that, like a director who's, I don't know, sort of maybe a bit of a megalomaniac, or kind of rules by fear a little bit? How do you how do you navigate that?
Well, then it becomes hard. Then you have to hang on to. That's when it helps to have a long view, and a bag of tricks that you've picked up over the years, that you can keep yourself safe and you can keep your, some sense of professionalism or dignity or something. Every once in a while you do run into, there are directors that are good at action and they just haven't got a clue what to do with a scene between 2 humans. It's like, making the car explode or the plane crash or the scene. They're all over that stuff. But they get to the scene, if the scene isn't working, they're lost. And it's funny, I guess over the years I've sort of I've accumulated a sort of this philosophy, these skills, where it doesn't matter that there are 200 crew members and trucks and cranes and lights, and we're running behind and so on. The only thing that as an actor, the only thing that you're responsible for is that 40 seconds between action and cut. You have to be an island in the middle of all of that. You have to find a quiet place to be. And I learned this not from Frank Darabont, but from Morgan Freeman, who's a genius at this. Find that quiet place to sit. Find that quiet place. Like he would sit like a Buddha on the set of Shawshank, and just conserving his energy, conserving his, quietly talk to people and what have you, and until the moment when it was time and everybody's ready and they're done fussing with the lights and they're done fussing with the sound, done waiting for the plane and whatever, and they say action. And it's the only thing that matters in the universe. Are you how honest is that vibration that you create when they say action? And all the rest of it is none of your business. No one's going to remember 10 years from now whether we went into meal penalties to get that. It's like, it doesn't, in a funny way, it's like nothing else matters at all, except was there a little spark of life in that, how strong was the human flame when the camera began to roll, and and the rest. And I get the biggest kick in the world out of that as well. I still find that the most exciting part of this business. When a character is alive in the moment and something happens, and then they yell cut, and you can step away and say, yeah, okay. That was, I'm glad it was in focus, right? You got that.
Can you tell?
Because it proud, and it was, I said the words, but everything else about it was, that was the first time these people had ever said these words.
Can you tell right after you've done a take whether or not it's good?
Well, I get a sense of it, yeah. You can tell. I can tell whether I was connected to it. I can tell whether I was, struggling to remember words, or struggling to, something was taking me out of the show, struggling to ignore somebody moving in the background in my sight line behind a camp or something like that. You can usually have a pretty good sense of whether,
Do you ever watch playback of yourself while you're on set, or no?
No, I don't like
it. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've seen, definitely certain actors love it, and others are like, it distracts them.
Yeah, I've never really enjoyed watching myself. Which is the funny thing to say. I love the doing of it, and I'm really glad that other people enjoy watching.
When you look back at or like performances when you were younger, can you tell whether something was good or not, or is it, or does not, even having the distance away from it doesn't give you any kind of a perspective?
I don't know. Some of my performances when I was younger, I don't want to say they're unwatchable, but I sit there remembering exactly what was going on that day. And I can see. Maybe it's just in a funny way. It's like listening to your own voice on a tape recorder. Everybody else thinks it sounds just like you, perfectly normal. But you hear it, and it's like I don't sound like that, or it's an odd thing. It's never comfortable for me to watch. I I find it. I'm too critical and you know.
I'm just curious because you've done some
burying my face in my hands.
Right. Like, why did I move my eyebrow? Why?
In your face, man. Why do you do that with your hands? Why did whatever was going on?
I was just going to ask, I'm curious because you did so much theater earlier in your career. Do you have a preference between theater, film, and TV?
I'm a really big fan of film and television these days. There's a tremendous power in exploring that universe.
That was a good word to use.
Well, but there is. My entire beginning of my career was on stage, and I loved it. But they're really different animals. And I go back to the theater. I played Julius Caesar in Denzel Washington's Julius Caesar on Broadway. The King with Jeffrey Rush and Susan Sarandon. I keep going back, but
is there any theater role that you would love to do?
I'm sorry?
Is there any role in theater that you would love to do? Like, do you sort of have a mental bucket list at all?
I'd love to do. I'm very good at Shakespeare. It's where I started, and it's always been a first love. I would love to. There are roles in Shakespeare that I would love to tackle. Now that I'm older, I guess I'm moving toward the. I'd love to play. I'd love to do Richard III. One day I'd like to do King Lear, but I got to do it before I'm too old. While I still have the strength, it requires a lot. It's an athletic event, you know. So it's much more strenuous than film.
What is it about Shakespeare that you love doing?
It's that thing I described earlier about getting caught up in the dialogue and carried along by it. Played Hamlet at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival in 1973, and one night we were sort of struggling. I felt I was pushing this thing up a hill, and 2.5 hours or 3 hours in this, and there's no oxygen in the air in Boulder, Colorado either. So it was really difficult. Until one night, I sort of surrendered myself to the dialogue somehow, and the rest of the play went by in minutes. It's hard to describe, but it was an extraordinary event. All the energy in the world was coming from those lines, from those wonderful words, all of poetry. And all you have to do is be the conduit. And it's out like a fire hose. These emotions are washing over me. And you don't have to cook anything up. I felt like I was being thrown from one scene into it. He was just being hurtled from one scene into another. And it was just an extraordinary awakening, I guess, for an actor. And I had done I had done Shakespeare before. I had done a lot of plays before, but I'd never really allowed myself to get swept up in it like that. And once that happened, I realized where it was. That was the aim. That was it should always feel like that. Let yourself be caught up in this. And Shakespeare does that like nobody else. The word so potent. The language so good. You get carried along.
I know you mentioned this before when you were talking about Morgan Freeman, but is there, are there, what are other actors that you really admire, you feel like you've learned a lot from?
Oh my goodness.
Or I guess, do you have, I know that's it's hard because there's so many obviously, but is there sort of an actor you feel like you wanted to kind of model your career after when you were younger, or is there someone that you feel you worked with and they sort of changed the way that you worked for the better?
I think I have to point to Morgan again for...
I mean, he's a good one. Let's be honest. He's a good one.
I'm sorry?
I said let's be honest. He's a good one.
Yeah, he's a good one. He's a... It's funny. I've learned from almost every actor I've worked with, especially early on. When I had so much to learn. It's like good and bad. It was funny. I did a Shakespeare with Amanda Plummer. La Jolla Playhouse years ago. We did Romeo and Juliet, and she played Juliet. And she had never done Shakespeare before that I know of. She was new to it, but she gave herself over to it in such a visceral way that the performance. She turned in a Juliet who was this petulant, spoiled, angry, lost kid. She was. It was one of the most fun performances I'd ever seen in my life, and she made a lot of the other actors on the stage who were, trained at RADA and sort of intoning this language and so on. And she just grabbed it by the balls, planted her feet, and said it like she meant it. And it was. I thought it was just a brilliant performance. I could watch that all day long. Just a kind of personal commitment. It was her Juliet. It wasn't anybody else's. That was one. That was one. I did Arturo Ui, the Irresistible Rise of Arturo Ui with Al Pacino, and we all used to gather in the wings to watch Al Pacino and Charlie Durham do this scene. Any time you could watch from the wings, we all did, because Pacino just pulled out all the stops. It's a role that he loved, and it was language that he loved, and he just chewed the furniture. I've never seen anything. But he just, it was big. It was a gigantic performance, and yet I was buying every minute. It wasn't that. It's funny because I think actors somehow reduce. We have a tendency to reduce it down and down and down and down until it feels honest for the camera or for the audience, and you reduce it down enough, there's nothing happening. There's nothing of, some of my favorite performances on film and on stage are these gigantic characters, you know what I mean? Bold, huge, bold choices, and because the actor invests in them, they fill them right up. I buy it.
And I guess just sort of as a last question, I guess it's sort of a corny question, but if you had to sort of look back at your younger self, your sort of 18, 19, 20-year-old self, what advice would you have given your younger self?
Oh my goodness.
Well, we'll limit it just acting-related advice. How about that?
I guess I don't. Maybe if I could talk to him, I would say, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so judgmental. It's a long ride. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Don't be afraid to be. Don't be afraid to leave yourself open. Leave yourself vulnerable.
Conversations with Actors is produced by me, Vivian Kerr. You can find out more about our guests at conversationswithactors.com. Please rate us in iTunes if you have a moment and hit subscribe. You can reach me at conversationswithactors@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments. Thank you very much for listening.